Okay, cool. So you guys, we did some stuff in the studio with automation, didn't we? In Pro Tools the other day with like a MIDI cut. That was kind of getting into MIDI.
Yeah.
You've done it in Pro Tools much, little bits?
Bits of MIDI, yeah.
Okay, cool. So in this session here, you will notice if we bring up our mixer, which of course we can do with command and equals. If you want to bring up your MIDI editor window, it's control and equals. And that will bring up this view, yeah? And the thing I like, if you're running like a multi-screen setup, so at home, I've got 3 monitors at home, so I can essentially have my range in the middle, and I can have my mixer on the right or my mixer on the left, and I can bring my MIDI up or bring my film up, whichever's like most contextual to what I'm doing. Another thing a lot of people don't know in Pro Tools, this never used to exist. See this tiny little thing here on the bottom left of the screen? That will bring up this view for those guys who are used to kind of using Logic. So it will bring the MIDI up actually at the bottom of your Pro Tools session. So if you're working on a laptop, or if you're working on something where you've only say got 1 or 2 screens, depending on what you're doing, that can sometimes help in terms of, this is sort of what I'm used to, this kind of benefits my workflow. So I will jump between, I'll either do my control and equals to bring up my MIDI view, and then in the same way that you kind of use your, okay, why have we just lost the screen? Interesting. Let's just unplug and plug that back in, sorry guys. Okay, cool. So I like this view in terms of, let's say, so this track, I've got a whole bunch of sort of bass toms and snares, right? So if I enable those, say if I take those off, so I essentially disable them, they're just hitting, it's doing a whole bunch of stuff here, right? So let's say I like this section and I want to copy this idea. So we got this kind of, you can solo it as well. So say you're writing to this track, you can hit S without having to go to your mixer to do so, right? Or any other page. If you want to bring your bass toms back in, you can then hit solo on them as well. Now we're hearing 2 channels, yeah? So you can essentially do your entire composition from this page in terms of muting, soloing, and writing your stuff. If I bring everything just back in so we can hear the whole session. Let's say, for instance, you want to copy this section here to another track. You can do that as well. So you just go Command and C. It's got a bug at the moment in Pro Tools where if you've got 2 channels operating, you're trying to copy something, which you do with Option M, which is merge. It will tell you could not complete the merge command because vector basically means graphics. This is going to be a graphical element that it doesn't like. So they've got a bit of a bug in there at the moment. So annoyingly, you have to disable the track you're copying from to turn that off. Option M, so we just merge that MIDI across, yeah? Important one, because if you just paste it in, it will overwrite what you've got. You've got to do Option M, which is then almost like merge this MIDI with MIDI that already exists. So from my perspective, for someone who writes for film, I find this a really comprehensive MIDI editor. Now, there may be similar things in Logic, there may be similar things in Ableton, but this is how I've kind of found my workflow like moving forward in terms of writing. I'll get into all the tools, creating tracks, and some of the differences in Pro Tools as well. So Logic, obviously, when you're doing multi-track stuff, you know, you do your kind of multi-outs, and you hit, us guys in the first year have been doing this extensively, but I gather you guys use multi-outs in Logic. Where you've got, say, 1 instrument track with, say, like Ultra B on it.
When you've got, like, drums and you can... Yeah, I do that.
I've definitely done it once. I haven't done it since.
So Pro Tools, like for Contact, so say what I'll do is I'll have 1 instance of Contact, say for percussion, and that might even be just 1 percussion library. Then I'll have 16 inputs into Contact. Pro Tools handles that really well. So the MIDI tracks in Pro Tools to an instrument track, I find is a little more straightforward. If we just take a look at the mixer for a second here, right? Ignore all the routing in here because I've got all sorts of stuff going on. What we're really looking at is what sort of tracks we've got here. So another little bug, look. My face seems to be living in a strange world there. So apologies, guys. It's a new Mac, and I think Avid are catching up. So obviously ignore the VCAs because that's just dealing with my percussion. What we're really looking at is these instrument tracks, right? So in this track, every single element that I've put into this track is an instrument track. So it's like a software instrument track in Logic. So there are no MIDI tracks happening in here at all. Pretty much every sample library is using Kontakt. So let's say, for instance, I create a new track, right? So let's just come back to the arrange page here. Let's get this out of the way so I can click that off the screen. Let's go for a new instrument track, yeah? Let's just call it demo. We're going to create one. Let's do it in stereo. So here's our demo track. Let's throw it at the top of the session, just for argument's sake, right? Now, as soon as you add a plugin, and bearing in mind I've customized my view quite extensively. Out of interest, have you guys looked at sends like this?
Yeah. How do you get the EQs at the bottom?
So you should be able to basically choose what you can see. So if you go view, and this one here, EQ curve. So you can turn a whole bunch of stuff on, yeah? Right, so if we go to our demo track, let's just add an instance of Kontakt, right? Kontakt 5. Okay, so I've got a sampler on an instrument track, right? But what you can do in addition to this, so if I just wanted to now play a note, obviously if I had a keyboard at home, I could arm trigger this, just hit record, and then play in my notes, and it would create a MIDI region for me. If you guys don't have a MIDI keyboard, I know quite a few of you have been using the keyboard literally on the Mac keyboard. If you're in a situation and you want to draw with a mouse, all you've got to do is get your pencil tool. So I use Escape to kind of sift through these tools at the top. I gather that most of us who've used Pro Tools in some way do that, yeah? So these are all your kind of edit tools, so to speak, or how you get to different lines, freehands, triangles, squares, randoms, which we'll talk about because this really is really helpful for drawing automation in MIDI. Yeah, so all these pencil tools are literally there. So say you want to draw something that kind of automates a pan, left, right, left, right, left, right, left, right, left, right, left, right, yeah, across the entire of your MIDI thing. And you're sitting there manually drawing the line up and down, up and down,
Yeah.
up and down. Yeah?
Yeah.
You don't need to do that in Pro Tools.
Just did that for like an hour yesterday.
Oh, I'm sorry about that. You can literally choose your, instead of freehand, or even a line if you want to point from A to B, which obviously Logic does as well. But yeah, if you want to draw some sort of like a parabolic curve or an S curve or a randomized pattern, say in automation, which we'll come into, you can do it from your tools, right? So all I do is just keep hitting escape, and you can see that moving at the top there, yeah? So that's just moving between different tools that we can use. What we're after is the pencil tool. Now, as soon as I click in there, it's kind of done a weird thing now where, let's make this a little bigger. And this confuses a lot of people because I would personally not want to work like that. I would not want to sit there drawing in these notes, right? But because it's not giving me a region, like any of these here, I can double click on, right? And I can go into this page and I can start drawing my notes or copying my notes or editing my notes, whatever I want to do. What it does when you draw into Pro Tools with that view, and for me, when I've seen people using Pro Tools, this is the first thing they go, nope, this is not for me, Pro Tools in MIDI is rubbish. All you got to do is change this from notes to clips or blocks. Blocks, sorry. And now you get the view like that. I know some Cubase users use the arrange page to compose. Again, it's not what my workflow would be. So I will set that straight away to be in a clips view or a blocks view. Then I'll double click on it and come into this view. Or I'll use the bottom here and I'll start editing my MIDI in here. Where is it? Demo, yeah? Got to make sure that it's active on the side there. Does anyone use groups in Pro Tools? So the group option applies to MIDI as well. So it can be really useful, right? So if you're used to grouping audio or grouping tracks, you can group literally a block of MIDI tracks, and then you can edit them all accordingly. So I find that useful as well. I'll sometimes create, once I've actually got a full set session, I'll actually group entire sections so that I can jump to them and hide them. I might show that next week. You can, I don't know if you've been shown that, you can literally hold control. And say you've got a group of drums, if you hold control and click, I believe it's control and click, it'll hide everything else in your session and just show you that group. You use that, yeah, cool. So let's stay on the MIDI side of it. So that's how you'd kind of, if you weren't going to just record arm here, hit record and play in notes, which would in turn record your MIDI information. That's how I'd do it if you happen to use a mouse and a keyboard, is I'd literally use the pencil tool here. If you don't want to do the whole jumping through escape to get to the pencil tool, you can just click it and then choose what you want to do. Freehand, put your notes in, right? But it will, as soon as you click in that view, it's going to give you this sort of awkward in my opinion anyway, way of writing, yeah? So just go straight back to clips, and then you can see it in this view here, right? So let's get rid of this one for now because I want to show you in full screen. So we can go Control and equals to bring this view up. Obviously you've got your T and your R. T and R zooms, and I know we've got different, you guys have been using it a lot longer, being third year, so try and note some of these key commands. T and R is king in Pro Tools. And if that never works, by the way, the T and R is because you've not got this clicked on. That's the thing that sort of activates that. Yes.
It happens a couple of times when I'm on the uni.
There's also another one down here. So that's the thing that will stop that from happening, and it will drive you nuts because you then have to start using all the zoomy tools, yeah? Those of us in Logic who've got MacBooks and they have a trackpad where you can zoom in and out, yeah, you can't do that in Pro Tools. It's just, yeah. So T and R are your zoomy tools, yeah? Now, your bottom section here, which most of the time when it opens up is not on. So again, you've got to look for the bottom here. We've got this tool here, yeah? This is where all your automation happens. And you can drag these out and size these to however you might want them to be. So by default, it's going to give you the velocity, and it's always going to give you the mob wheel. Velocity is obviously how hard the note is pressed. So if you think of it in terms of a piano, if you're pressing really lightly, you're going to be able to barely hear it. If you're pressing really hard, it's going to be at the top forte that's been recorded in that sample in this capacity if we're using the piano, right? So you've got between 0 and 127 in terms of MIDI. Mob wheel will act, it depends on the library. So generally speaking, you're probably going to be using mob wheel, expression, velocity, sustain if it's a piano library, because that will literally be your sustain pedal if the library's been coded to deal with that. So it's going to change depending on what you do. Anyone using Spitfire audio stuff, if you start getting crazy with the mic placements, you can automate them. They do exist on MIDI CC channels. So I believe it's 21 through 25 will do your close, tree, surround and Atmos microphones. So yeah, if you want something to be, if you want to use their source microphone, so to speak, to have your track just disappear into surround, say, you can automate those within the library. So you just have to become a nerd and read their manuals and then search for a MIDI CC list online, and it will give you all the numbers of MIDI CCs, of which there are many. And you can do this here as well if you go add and remove controllers. There's a whole bunch of stuff just here for demo, but it goes on and on and on. 119 I've got here, most of which are undefined. So this is all information you can send to various synths, soft synths, plugins, whatever it is you want to do. So if you want to add different parts here, you've got this plus and minus, right? So let's say that we're not using a mob wheel, you can just get rid of it. That gives you then more space, right, to deal with this. So obviously you can drag up and down, no different to any other door. If you want to add more, you can just hit the add button. Now we've got, let's go for expression. So now I can do multiple different things again, right, with this drawing window. So I can freehand it. If you guys like me don't like doing things like that, you can buy really cheaply, or if you've got like a keyboard that's got MIDI knobs on it, you can basically, I use the Korg Nano Control 2, it's about 20 quid. So all my automation is on faders. because then I can play, say, a string ensemble and record the automation as I play it. So it's more of a performance as opposed to sitting there getting surgical with a pencil tool.
Called Nano 2.
Korg Nano Control 2 is the one I use. But again, if you're doing what Dan was doing yesterday, which was literally drawing crazy panning, left to right, left to right, left to right, which you guys may well be doing, well, you'll be doing it in Logic. So let's not get confused between our DAW assignment for Logic. But you can choose triangle. There you go. As opposed to having to,
It's a lot more accurate than
Yeah.
what I was doing.
yeah, as opposed to what, like,
Yeah.
you know,
I mean, took a bit more care than that, but
and then, well, what did you do? Almost like a line.
yeah, kind of. Yeah, but I was doing lines just really slowly, so I'd make the mark and then I would. Yeah.
Well, like sine wave.
I mean,
Yes.
you got squares. So I don't know if you had an effect. I've used that one before where I've had an effect kind of going mute, mute, unmute, mute, unmute, mute, unmute. Sometimes I do that if I want to use a plugin that's for a specific reason, like a creative reason. I use that. So you've got those options there as well.
Have you changed? So would it be with the grid that you change how big the triangle would be?
Yeah. So if you 100%, yeah. So say we go down and we bring this out. So these are your grid tools, guys. So we're currently set to 16ths. So if you set this to quarter notes and then we try that again, we go triangle. Then yeah, it's going to do quarters, yeah.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Does that make sense? In terms of the grid of Pro Tools, our favourite grid.
Sometimes I've had it where I change the grid and it doesn't change the grid. Is
In-
there any reason for that? Or...
So you've got to have that activated.
Okay.
If that's not
Right.
if that's not activated, you're just free forming it. So your grid is kind of like the thing that I love the grid. I live by the grid. You've also got shuffle tools, slip tools, spot tools, right? And grid. So this is all to do with how you're kind of touching up your note, so to speak. So obviously in Logic we just drag left and right. Now if I had this set to grid and I tried to drag this left and right, I need to go back to my normal tools. It's going to drag it by a bar, right? Or a beat, I should say. If I had that set of the grid there to literally be a bar, then it would drag back one bar. Which is obviously, I find that useful if I've just recorded a note in and say I want this to go on for 4 bars, and I want to copy that down, I want that to go on for 4 bars as well. And I just change my mind. I turn on, say, tempo, and actually I want this section to be 3/4, right? I find it useful in that I can change it between grid, or if I'm using, say, something like Hollywood strings, East-West Hollywood strings, if you block chord when you're arranging for orchestral instruments in general, if you grid it, it just sounds really unnatural and kind of terrible. So I will do things like drag the notes slightly back or drag notes that start slightly off the grid, because if you think of like 30 players, they're not all going to come in precisely at the right time because we're human beings and not robots, right? So there's nuances in playing. So I'll have to switch them between the slip mode to get that to be done. Shuffle mode, say for instance let's do it by grid. So say for instance I've got this note right to the grid and I go to shuffle mode, that will literally enable me to bump it up. Why are you ignoring me? Let's just copy this over. Okay, interesting. Shuffling with audio will literally say you've got 2 clips of audio and you want to budge them right up to each other. So in Logic, we'll be dragging it across, right, to get it just right. If you've got shuffle mode turned on, you can literally just drag it and it will match it right to the start of the session. Doesn't seem to work in MIDI, which is probably why it's red. I must admit, I've never shuffled a MIDI note like that in MIDI. I've never done it, but that's what that mode will do. The main 2 you're going to be using is literally grid and split and slip when you're talking about MIDI. Yeah. Obviously, you can copy in the same way that you copy audio. So if you've got this MIDI note here and you hold Option, I don't know if you guys can see that little plus that's coming up. That'll enable me to copy this note down, yeah? And then I can change it and do whatever it is that I need to do with it. So again, lots of comparisons between Logic and Pro Tools, just because that's the two main DAWs that we use, and I'm trying to give you guys almost reference points if you've not seen these things. Pro Tools doesn't make it particularly easy user friendly to like quantize things. Like Logic is amazing at things like that. Anything to do with quantizing or adding swing to your MIDI or kind of like changing your performance, it makes it really simple to do so because there's a Q button literally to the left here, right? Which you can just use constantly. Pro Tools, you've got to go into a menu. There is a key command for it, which completely escapes me. I believe if we go to help and we search for quantize, I used to use this all the time, this key command, and then I just forget it. Let's have a look. Okay, so apparently it's Option 0. So if I go Option 0, there you go, guys, I'll save you some time. Option 0, yeah, will bring up your quantize window. And you've then got a whole bunch of different options. So you can quantize just one note, or you can quantize a group of notes together. It is entirely up to you how you want to quantize your notes. So if we choose these two notes here, what are we quantizing? Note on, note off. So obviously that's when the note starts, when the note finishes. You might want to leave the note off part free, and you might want to preserve the note duration. So if you've written a note to cover, say, 2.5 bars, and you only want to quantize the start of the note, but you want to keep the length of the bar, that's how you do that. You preserve the length of the note and you say, I'm just quantizing the start. Let's do note on, note off for our example. Then you're choosing what you want to do. So I'm going to go for quarter notes. If I applied that, I don't know if you guys saw that. Let's make this a little bit more. Let's go to 16ths and just drag that in. If I apply that, let's go to a whole note. Yeah? Obviously, if you want to, if I undo what I've done there, obviously if you do want to randomize things, so say you've got an entire, say we've got like a block here, and you want this to be randomized, so again, like a string patch, right, an ensemble patch, you can randomize it, so you can say I want to do it by 16ths, and I want you to randomize by about 42%, and it will just keep changing its start and end length. Yeah, so you've got randomizations and things like there as well. You can add swings. You can do things in triplets like you can in Logic. It's got all the same options. It's just not designed into the HUD in the way that might be useful. Other things in this window. So by getting to that, by the way, I just right clicked and then you've got event operations, and event operations will give you a whole bunch of stuff. So change velocity might be something that you wanted to do. Then you've got a whole bunch of different options. So say you've been living in pen and pencil drawing in Pro Tools land, and you haven't got access to a keyboard, and you're doing a piano and you're copying notes, all of which are exactly the same velocity. And again, it starts getting into non-human playing, right? You can use this to kind of help you out. So you can say, I want you to change you can either say, I want you to set all the velocities all the way up to 127, boom. Or I want you to do it by a scale, or do it by a percentage, or randomize it. So let's say we randomize it, do it smooth, ascending up on a curve, a minimum of like 40 and a maximum of 127, and randomize it by about 40%. It just keeps now changing those three notes on the bottom there, yeah? Make sense?
If I then copy those MIDI, will it keep the like those MIDI notes into a different section? Will it then keep that randomization?
Yeah.
That's brilliant.
It will indeed. So if we copy this section over here, say,
So if you're to write one bit randomize it, then you can place that in different sections without them all sounding exactly the same. That's quite cool.
yeah. So if you're blocking stuff, if you've written a section and you're copying it from one section to the other, that's one thing you can do. Then you could literally just change this slightly, say like that. So you're keeping the same shape, so to speak.
Yeah.
You know, might be your bass notes louder, say, or your treble notes louder. If you wanted to keep that shape, but you didn't want to change the MIDI completely, then you can do that really easily. Shift and up, same as Logic. Octave up, octave down. If you do Option and down, it will copy it. So sometimes I do that if I want to block. Yeah, if you want to copy it, then drag it down. So you want to almost duplicate your, and this is something I do. It depends whether you're, in my context, if you're not writing necessarily for something that's going to be performed by an orchestra, and I want something to sound a little bigger, I will double samples out into sort of ridiculous player ranges because no one cares. Directors don't care; they just want it to sound good, right? So I don't want to start getting into divisi like without if I don't need to. So let's get back to this kind of routing MIDI channels, right? Does everyone understand the difference, say, between a MIDI track and an instrument track? So a MIDI track, all a MIDI track can do is literally read and send MIDI data. Can't do anything else. It's literally a routing track, so to speak, that conveys MIDI data. So you can't add any plugins, you can't compress them. You can change the volume of them, but all that's doing is changing MIDI volume as a MIDI CC, which is CC1, or expression, which is CC7. Mob wheel CC. I think volume might be 7 actually. And mob wheel's 1. Get a key because that helps.
What's their purpose if you can do, from what I can take, you can do everything in an instrument track that you can do in a MIDI track?
So the purpose of them is let's say you've got this instance of Contact, right? And let's say we load up, I don't know, Albion. Let's just do brass low. So right now on this instrument track, if I solo what I've got here, which is probably going to sound terrible because I haven't even been paying attention to.
It'll probably sound very jazzy and
Let's put it onto Arco. Okay. So that's another thing, by the way. Say you're playing from here. No, with Logic, you have to play the beginning of the MIDI note. Who was I talking to you about this?
Yeah, it's so.
You know, you have to go back to the start. Say you've got a pad section that goes on for like 20 bars, and you've programmed a riser in Gravity or something like that, yeah? And then you're writing a big drum section or something to like crescendo that end part. You have to go back and play the whole damn section again. There is no way that I've found that you can do that. Pro Tools, you can just choose where you want to start.
Cut the MIDI so it starts from where you're just starting it, but then glue it all back together for the end. But it's a mission.
It's not ideal. It's not ideal. So that is just a little pointer there that I like. But coming back to your point, Dan, so yeah, nothing stops you from, and that is precisely what I've done. This was a quick write. Yeah, I didn't have much time to put this together. So all of these, that's the play engine there, all of these are literally using literally one instrument on one instrument track. But let's say I wanted to add 16 instances. So let's say I wanted to add, let's go into here as well, and I want to bring in brass high as well. So now we've got 2 instruments loaded into Contact, right? But they're both on one instrument track. So yeah, I could set my MIDI channel to also be MIDI channel 1, which means that anything that's being sent from here, too low. So now we're talking to both of these patches, but I can't change them individually. So technically I'm limited to one instrument per instrument track. Whereas if I go ahead and create 5 MIDI tracks, so now we've got these tracks to live here, yeah? I can come in here and be, okay, so you there, you are brass low, you are brass high, yeah? I can say that where do I want to send this to is really, really simple. You don't have to go into an environment to do this. So literally in your I/O, so to speak, I'm saying that I want you to go into my demo stem, and I want you to use channel 1, and I want you to use channel 2. So now I'm in the capacity where if I move this down to this MIDI channel and this down to this MIDI channel, I've got this, so we can say, I don't know, demo. Let's just call it brass. There's already a track in the name, of course there is. Brass 1. So yeah, another annoying thing, you can't name things twice. Logic doesn't care. You can name it.
It's kind of a good thing, though.
But you end up with...
So many Logic sessions where I'm like, well, there's 17 guitars. What do they
Which one?
do?
I get it, but
Which one do I need?
I end up with all these different symbols. Like #1, #2, #3. It becomes a nightmare. So now you've kind of created what Logic would call a multi-out. But we've done it manually, and now when we look at our contact, and I set this back to MIDI channel 2, and let's just say we remove these high notes, remove these low notes, and let's just change it up a little. Just silent. So not paying any attention to any musical content. You now have got information being sent from these MIDI tracks into Contact on 2 separate channels, yeah? So what that does is, A, it makes it easier for you in terms of what am I loading, what patch do I want to... If you could build an entire section, you could have a whole section of synths just in one Contact library without having to continually open up 16 instances of Contact. Obviously, we're living in the world where new Macs are sort of ridiculously powerful, and we don't have to be as conscious of resources that we once were, but it will save resources by loading in this manner, because you're physically not overloading Pro Tools in terms of its routing. Like you're not, all you're doing is saying, here's my audio instance, here's vessels of information transferring in terms of MIDI. You can do all the same type of stuff on here, so if I double click this, you can add your expression, you can add your mob wheels, you can add anything that you wanted to do in terms of what I previously showed you. You can also do this from down here as well, so you can use your arrow up. Make sure that it's on. That's one thing I'd say, that's one thing it won't... Pro Tools won't do anything for you. Yeah, at all. It will not do anything for you. You have to tell it every single thing that you want it to do. Which is kind of useful and a bit irritating as well. Like if I've double clicked on a MIDI region, you would have thought I wanted to see the MIDI region, but it will not activate it for you. It just won't do it. Sorry about that. I know, and it will literally show you, yeah, I know.
Logic does so many things that I don't want it to do, and then I'm like, but why is that done like that? And then I don't know how to get back from it. So.
Yeah. It can get you to a place really quick, but people aren't always aware of what
Where they're at.
using 10 compressors and 4 EQs. Oh, okay. So yeah, it won't do anything. It will not do anything for you. So you can literally compose your entire section, so to speak, just by doing that. Then you can group everything as well. So you can choose the tracks that you want to group. Say we want our brass section here. Command G, create a group, brass. You can add a VCA for that as well if you wanted to, or add it to an existing VCA, and then it tells you all your groupings. So once we hit OK, you've now got a brass section. In terms of a group.
Collapsing all the MIDI tracks into that one instrument track, like kind of like you do on Logic, or you just hide them.
You can hide them, or you can create a folder. You know,
Create a folder.
you can create a folder in Pro Tools. Crazy times. Is it sad that I was actually really excited to read that you could add folders in Pro Tools? Like actually genuinely excited about that.
It definitely would make my life easier.
So yeah, if you go new again, you can choose either a routing folder, which is in Logic, as we call it, an instrument stack.
Yeah.
It's basically the same concept. So it's basically it's a BCA that you can add effects to. That's the way I view it. So if we go basic folder, I don't know why I've just called it DA, but whatever, there you go. Then yeah, you can drag these elements in. Boom.
So nice.
Then you've got that little folder icon there that will get rid of it. So obviously, if you're ending up with huge, great sessions, like massive, great sessions, where you've got loads of stuff loaded in, obviously everyone's coming at composition from a different standpoint. Like my sessions they're huge. They're about 500 tracks big. So if I'm writing a specific track that I don't need synth for, or I don't need woodwinds for, or I don't need strings for, why am I even seeing them? And you can literally as well you hide and make them inactive. Use the kind of make inactive function, guys. If you've got that situation happening where you don't need a specific section. Say you've set up all your contact libraries or all your play libraries or whichever virtual instrument sampler. It could be Logic samplers or it could be anything. Say you've done that but you're not using it, and suddenly Pro Tools is coming up saying system overload. You know that message we all love. Just make that whole thing inactive, because then you've turned off an entire thing that you're not using. So there's different ways of going about it, and it's the same in any DAW that you use. Like I say, you don't have to go down this route, but that to me makes sense, right? So if I want to see what I'm doing in terms of this track with my brass, it's all within that folder. I've got an instrument track at the top where I can literally add my instruments, and then I've got my MIDI information at the bottom here, which feeds then into the contact sampler. You can go deeper than that. You can start setting. I know us guys in the first years, we were doing this in Logic with Contact, where we were doing then outs from Contact back into Logic. And you can do that in Pro Tools as well. So you can start mixing. I'll mix, say, brass high and brass low. Oh, there's a stem for those two things, or brass short, brass long.
Yeah.
So that you get more context then over your stems, especially if you're trying to convert this stuff to 5.1 and beyond. Any questions thus far? I know I've kind of just walked in and gone boom. It's really difficult that you guys can't practice this right now. Does anyone want to come and play on my MacBook, as long as you promise not to break it? Or do you want to review the video? Do you want me to go over? Is there anything that you've tried to do in Pro Tools that's not worked? I will go over that automating a plugin. Anything that's specifically kind of hit you as, what is this doing? How is it going to go from them? Oh, it's just fading in general kind of thing. Okay, cool. So if we let's just have a look. So let me just grab a bit of audio. I must have a bit of audio on here. Go away. Samples. Let's just drag. Give me 1 second, Elliot, and I will show you. All right. God knows what this is going to be. Nice. Some horror-y stuff. So let's drag this out so you can see this in a bit more context. Fading in Pro Tools, you don't have to go to like a fade tool or anything like that. If you move your cursor at different points along the left and the right hand side, you'll get different options, one of which is fade. So I don't know if you can see that box that's currently popped up. If I now click and drag along like that, it gives me this, and then I can change the S curve on there.
So it's like a nicer version of Premiere Pro. Premiere Pro one, you just right click at the end.
Premiere, exactly. Yeah, Premiere Pro, very similar. And to be honest, even Premiere will do this as well, where you can then double click within here, and you get this option where you can actually start equal gain, equal power, different S curves, different shapes. Yeah, so that's really useful in terms of, like, again, something else that you don't need to do. You can do that in Logic, but you just have to go for a slightly. You have to choose the specific tools. But yeah, all the slope and everything is exactly the same as Premiere. So that's the fading in there. This here, remember we talked about flex time? Pro Tools is under TCE, Elastic Audio. So now you've got this section here. I know I've moved slightly off MIDI here, but I've got you guys talking about Pro Tools, might as well do it. So if you choose that tool at the top there, and you go to TCE, which activates our Elastic Audio, then you can choose exactly the same as Logic what you want it to be. So say we choose, I don't know, like let's just go for vary speed. Then analyzes the clip, and then you see you've got almost like a time. If I drag that out now, we've now time stretched that piece of audio. But unless you know to hold on that and change that to TCE, you don't know how to do it. It's kind of like a hidden away thing, and that will now probably sound horrific. Nice. Kind of concerned that was the first random bit of audio that I found on my Mac, but there you go. but there you go. So that'll be fading in general. So let's say, thank you for bringing up a bit of audio because we can bring this in. Let's say I wanted to add on, let's go for say a reverb, right? So let's just add the deverb, which is just a built-in Pro Tools reverb, right? And let's just load up something crazy. I don't know. Let's go for a bright plate. What's that saying? So a question I get a lot is, well, how on earth do I automate that, right? Because if I come down here, I've got different blocks or different parts I can use. I can activate my automation from here, but all I've got is volume, mute, and pan on an audio file. I can't seem to do anything here. So you have to do a little bit of trickery. So you have to actually go into the plugin itself, and you've got this box here, and this is your plugin automation enable. So again, Pro Tools will not do anything for you. You have to tell it to do absolutely everything. So if we click this box here, you then get all your different options, so to speak, that can be sent to your automation, right? So if we wanted to automate the wet and the dry, you can add that to this list. We can hit OK. You see that now's lit up. It's lit up green, saying that this is now automation available. If you guys really get into this, one really powerful tool that I just got is the Avid control on the iPad. It changed my life because I don't need to touch my mouse anymore ever again. Either you can draw all this automation on your iPad. You can switch between tracks, record, enable, name tracks, save sessions, like open folders, close folders. It's just like it's insanity. Yeah, I think you need it's absolutely insanity. It just changed my life. It basically is like the their 5 console that the channel strip plugin uses. It's kind of modelling that, so it's modelled on that. So I plug, you'll work through Wi-Fi, or you can plug the iPad directly in, but it's literally in real time. Like it's absolutely, and it's free. This is just insanity. It changed my.
I've used it for the faders on my phone, which is right. If I'm trying to automate faders instead of like doing it on my mouse, I do have a MIDI keyboard, but the faders are a bit small on it.
Sure.
So doing it on the phone kind of
works as well. But yeah, you can. It really is. Now I've activated that on the iPad version. It would be really easy to just jump in and actually change that in the fly. So now this section's been activated, so to speak, literally by clicking on this box here. Yeah, this automation plugin mode. When I now come down to here and I add something new, I've got audio 1, wet and dry on the deverb. So once we click that, let's bring up our pencil tool. You can now start to basically draw automation on the wet and the dry, which then if we play the sound again, it's one of those things. It is until you've actually got a composition running, you're not going to know kind of which way you prefer, but you will get people more and more now coming into the studio. If any of you going into either writing for yourself, if you're going to write for yourself, especially in the sync world, most stuff is going to end up in Pro Tools at one point. You just can't get away from it. If you're going to be an engineer in a studio, you will find people come in and they've got MIDI in their sessions. It's useful to know how to actually interact with it and how to kind of change it. Let's take a quick sort of 5-10 minute break, right? We'll come back and then we'll go over a couple of bits, and I might give you guys the opportunity just to either have a go here, even if it's just drawing a line or copying something or moving something, and then we'll see if we maybe do a repeat session next week, which might give you a week to go and play. Then you might have following questions. Tony suggested I did 2 sessions with you guys. I think that might be the way to proceed. So I will pause my video and we'll come back in a little bit. Okay, so welcome back, part 2. So the question basically was, so we've rooted in this folder, right? You've got your folder icon up there. The question was around, okay, so we've got different MIDI tracks coming into an instrument track. One good way of knowing it's a MIDI track, by the way, is by looking at this section. It just does not show you anything besides its I/O and its automation writes and reads. So you can tell that that is an instrument track, that's an audio track, or it's a track that you can add plugins to, right? These ones you cannot do anything with. So if we go back to this view, if we've sent these 2 tracks, ignore these ones because we're not using them. I'm just going to disable them. So at the moment we've got 2 MIDI tracks that are actually active, brass high, brass low, with some random notes drawn on each track. We've got an audio track, which is when I was going through with Elliot to show the fading and the time stretching, because that's kind of sort of living in our folder. I'm just going to right click and make that one inactive for a minute, just so it's not being used. So if we wanted to then root out of Contact, I've had to just set this back up. So it's a case of, at the top here, you've got this kind of folder option. Outputs is off by default. You have to turn that back on, choose your outputs. What Pro Tools will give you is almost like a stereo 1, and then auxiliaries 1 to 4 as standard, and sometimes some surround stuff if you're using it. You need to reconfigure this, so you have to change your outputs. So if you hit plus here, I'm just going to say that I want 8 stereo, so we can have 2 channels. So I want 8 outputs, of which there are 2 channels per output, aka left and right stereo, yeah? Then we're going to say that our host output is going to start ST1. I'm going to say to ascend the output assignment, to delete the existing, and to make it my default configuration. Hit OK, and it will come up with this. Now you've probably got to close Pro Tools, as we discovered, and reopen it, because while this has got our 8 outputs here, when I go to add a auxiliary track, so we can do that now. So we're going to create a new stereo auxiliary track. Let's just call this Contact 1. Put it in our folder, make sure it lives in our folder. So I should be able to now choose an input, right? And the input should be a plugin, of which there's all the different plugins I've got loaded in the session. But Brass is only giving me Contact ST2 and these auxiliaries, right? So if I choose Contact Auxiliary 1, go back into my example of Contact, and I choose my output to be... So yeah, I've got to restart it. Let's restart Pro Tools a second, see if it will do it. So yeah, Logic will give you that kind of initializing core audio, right? Whenever you change, say, your audio interface, you know, between like headphones or between an interface. Pro Tools, it kind of closes it and then reopens it. Let's see if it's going to do it. All right, so we're just going to open the same one. Probably should have brought a session with less stuff in it. Would have opened slightly quicker. Okay, cool. Okay, cool. Right, so have I now got in this KT1 track that we created? Yeah. So it's Pro Tools won't do anything for you. You have to reconfigure it, right? I must have said that about 5 times now, right? So now if we choose contact ST3, and then we come up to our brass saying we've got our output ST3. In theory, if I'd got my group on and I solo these, and I solo this output as well, playing out of that track because we've still got, let's just send both of them out to ST2. Set this in, plug in, brass, ST2. Yeah. So there's no end to that. You can send pretty much, well, I've limited it at the moment to 16, but you can just keep go into plugin, choosing whichever instance of contact that you want. Then you can route these out. You can name these as well within the plugin. It does not come back here, which is slightly irritating. Might be something that changes eventually, but yeah, at the moment it doesn't seem to be renaming here. It used to. So again, it might be just a little bit of a buggy thing on the M1 Max at the moment. So if you wanted to do that though, you can 100% do that. So then now you've got control over what element is then coming out of contact, as opposed to only having control of basically this stem. So if you wanted to really compress or kind of, I don't know, shelf part of that brass, but you wanted to leave the rest of the section alone, sure, you can do it within contact. You can go into the little cog. Let's just turn off our output so we can see a bit more. And you can add an effect of an EQ or a filter, right, on each individual instrument in contact, which I know us guys have gone through a fair bit. So you can do it within contact, but if you want to actually use plugins within Pro Tools on separate tracks, especially if you approach a mix, I would start using your multi-outs. Any questions thus far? Anything that's literally been, I can't do this, why is it not? Especially for you guys who've been using it in the studio.
Oh, one thing. So like when I'm doing drums, I don't want to see the whole piano roll. On Logic, you can just like kind of like play in the bits and then compress it so you only see those certain MIDI notes. Can you do that on?
Well, in terms of the actual size of the window itself.
Yeah. So you say I've got I'm only playing like 5 notes, but one's like a middle C and one's like a high one, and I want to be able to see all of them just on one page. Is there a way of just like kind of only seeing?
So
that is one feature of Logic that I haven't been able to find.
So let's just unsolo. Let's keep these solo because it's stuff all over the place. Right, solo them. So if we go into this section, say, are you talking about this view?
Yeah.
So that will change our colours. Only thing I can think is that you make them bigger or smaller, so probably bigger. I don't think, to my mind, but then it must be said, I've never actually attempted to. I don't think I can say I only want to see, say, 2 octaves. I don't want to see any more. So if I was focusing on just a specific section, I'd zoom in there. So what we're viewing basically 2 and a bit.
Yeah.
But I know the view you mean. I know the thing you mean.
It's for, I guess, for like piano and like actual note stuff, but it's more for when you're doing drum editing.
You're more contextualized, or
it's a bit more like a sequence that way as well.
Try this view. So make them big. Oh, not small. That's kind of. In fact, I've got drums here, haven't I? Yeah. So I suppose that's kind of not really what you wanted to do, but it's better.
Having that view is definitely going to make
then
it
you know.
you can roll bring that out.
Let's just get out of this view there. Yeah, so you've that's probably going to be more helpful than anything else.
Yeah.
Yeah. Does anyone want to have a play with this, or did you want to go and almost have a play within the next week? Should I run another session next week? Same time? Yeah?
Yeah, I'm happy for nice way to go big from out and they put different elements in.
Got you, that's fine. That's fine. So if I run the same, I'll do 9 to 11, yeah? I'll either stay in Northampton the night before, or I'll just, I'll leave at like 4 a.m, yeah? Get set up. But yeah, the video is up there, guys. Like I say, do try and review it. Try and, if you can get in the studios, if you can get a free month trial. It might even be 90 days, If it's 90 days, 3-month free trial, and just use it. Get in there and see if this is actually going to be beneficial for me to have. I potentially am a bit biased because I do love Pro Tools, but I would say get yourself a trial and go for it.
You're not biased.
I'm not biased at all, no.
Tony's biased.
Tony's biased. Okay, he does love Pro Tools. He does love Pro Tools. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Well, and I understand why. I understand why. It is. Look, it is the industry leader for a reason.
And I mean, you get like a student discount on it when you're in uni, so it's about how much.
Yeah, the discount is like solid.
How much is it outright? Because I can only find subscription price.
So if you get it on student, I just bought it. I think it was about 300 quid on student deal, but it's usually about 600 quid, so it's about half.
No, I don't have either of those.
I was waiting for the next loan to drop me. So I did.
That goes quite quickly.
Yeah, it does.
I would recommend getting a free trial, see which route you want to go. The only problem with buying it outright, I believe you can. I think you get updates for a year. There's a support package you can get.
To be honest, I have to disagree there because Pro Tools never go through any major updates. Literally, it doesn't really change.
It's changed quite a bit. It's changed quite a bit. Honestly, I would say this Pro Tools 12 2022, we got dark mode, we got folders, we got Dolby Atmos. Like, there's a lot of stuff. There is a lot of stuff that's gone into it, and definitely underneath the hood, you will find different versions that, like, I think it was Pro Tools 10 I had severe issues with, and I moved to Logic for 2 years. Didn't open Pro Tools for 2 years because it was just dreadful. 11 got better. 12 was a good launch, and this is probably the most solid version of Pro Tools I've ever seen, and I've used it since LE6. So that was what, 2009?
One thing they got rid of on this one, I think, was volume trim. Because whenever I try and do it, because I use volume trim on the studio once, then when I try and open it on my home Mac, it doesn't like it at all.
Okay, interesting.
Which is something that is a bit annoying.
What, on the faders themselves?
No, so you know how you can so where you choose the on the other view, not this view, on the other view where you can choose like either clips or the where it says clips.
Oh yeah.
Drop-down menu for there. So where it's got, I guess it would be it would be for the audio, but usually you can do audio volume trim.
Right. Okay.
But I didn't think that was that useful of a feature. It was
just something that you got used to using.
Yeah, it's something that Tony kind of showed me how to use, so I started using it, and then
They got rid of it. It might be they moved it.
I think it was just a bit of a useless feature, to be honest, because you can do all the audio trimming on the actual audio track. So I didn't really see the point. Like when I saw they got rid of it, I was like, yeah, it kind of makes sense.
Okay, let's have a look though, because you should got it there, right?
So there was an actual where you can do the volume automation. There was another one that was volume trim.
Right. Okay.
But
interesting.
I think that so if you did a load of automation, then you can do the overall trim of it.
Right. Okay.
But you can kind of just select all the automation, bring it up and down. Anyway, so
I see what you're saying. You're just doing it different. I see what you're saying. Yeah. Okay.
It's just
Part of me thought you were talking about that. Then that's fine. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Cool.
No, not the gain trim.
Cool. All right, guys. Well, look, I'll edit the video together tonight. Bang it out. I'll email you out in the same email thread that I got the links to the video, and then we'll pick up next week. But yeah, do try and get in the studio or at least get that license, and then you can hit me with some questions, or if anything has not worked, we can pick up again next week. Yeah.
Wouldn't it be nice if they actually install Pro Tools?
It's coming. It's coming.
So of course it's coming after we leave.